This is Dorothy, again, the Jamaican woman who grew up and knew Grandma Beryl, Miss Beryl, personally. Take a listen.
And Miss Beryl, by the way, I see Vice President Harris on the box, and I sit up straight and I think, my God, she looks so much like Miss Beryl. Her facial features, the only thing is Miss Beryl was much smaller in stature, but
Well, okay, if Miss Beryl, because Kamala is very fair-skinned.
Right.
Was Beryl fair-skinned?
yes, she was.
She was?
She was. She was fair-skinned.
She was? Okay.
Yes, she was very fair-skinned.
Oh.
With black hair.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So she was so fair-skinned that now that I'm older and I can spot people by their skin coloring, etc., for me, I would say there was something Irish there.
How interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say somewhere along the line she would have had ancestors that were Irish. Yes.
Actually, can I show you a photograph?
Of course.
Of an old lady.
Yes.
And some people speculate that this is Miss Beryl.
Right. Okay. Nah, that's not Miss Beryl.
That's not Miss Beryl.
That's definitely not Miss Beryl.
Okay.
That's not Miss Beryl.
There's another person, but could that be Miss Beryl?
No, that's not
That's
Miss
not
Beryl.
Miss Beryl
That's
either.
not Miss Beryl either.
Okay.
Don't know who that is.
Okay.
That's not Miss Beryl. That ain't Miss Beryl. You know, as you were describing the fair skin and looking like Kamala, I was thinking this can't be the Miss Beryl grandma that's in Kamala's book. Yeah, that sounds about right. You're saying Irish, and that's funny because Judge Joe Brown had a very distinct memory that Donald Harris told him that he was Irish and Hindu, and things are starting to add up, not in Kamala Harris's favor. And my distaste for a woman who borrowed a black person for her autobiography so that she could secure the black vote. Do you understand how fundamentally racist that is? Do you understand how despicable that is? I mean, you have to be the worst kind of political vermin to borrow a black person to put in your book, to present to the public as your grandma, who definitively was not your white Irish grandma. My disgust for Kamala Harris and my now general disgust for any person who supports this woman or from here on out purports that she is the first black anything, okay? Recognize that this woman put on blackface because she wants to win the election. I pretty much knew that I was on the right track. Her silence about the matter was deafening. The removal of everything seemed very suspicious. No longer speaking about her blackness seemed very suspicious. Now she's too highbrow. I'm not even going to address. You know why you're not going to address it? Because you're not black. You are not black. You never have been black a day in your life. You truly disgust me. I want you to know that you are filth. Kamala Harris is filth. And Lady C was similarly shocked, gobsmacked, as she put it. Take a listen.
And gobsmacked. Absolutely gobsmacked. Did she seriously think she was going to be able to get away with this?
She did.
So this is not about anti-blackness, because, as you could see, Dorothy is not white. So what does seem to be extraordinary is the creation of a black grandmother. Did she get somebody off the street and pop them in the photograph? Was it a helper? Who was this woman? I mean, it boggles the imagination.
Do you guys understand, like, what I am piecing together here? It is my view today that Kamala Harris descends from a long line of wealthy slave owners who then turned into communist leaders with the explicit goal of overthrowing countries and overriding people's independent freedom under the guise of offering them more freedom, more handouts. This seems to be the picture that we are painting on both sides of her family. The mother came from a wealthy Indian communist family, okay? Now we know, or I have a suspicion, that her father as well came from a wealthy family of slave owners. I do believe that this is his true mother, not Beryl. And I'm going to again now show you a different chart. This is just me putting together what I think the true family tree is. And obviously this is going to take a lot more investigation, but I think these are his parents. I believe Lady Idris Allen, who allegedly had no children at all, and you can see she lived a very long life. And he describes, the women who raised him lived a long life and says, oh, she died and it was very hard for me and blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, Lady Idris Allen, if I'm correct, and that is his mother, that would be a massive secret. And it would be a massive secret we're hiding because it would mean that she essentially descends from communist slave-owning royalty who intentionally divided people and move them across into different countries and put them into powerful positions. Now, again, this is my conclusion based on what I am seeing. There is just no way. There is no way, okay? All three of the relatives that they listed, Christiana Brown, Beryl, and Miss Iris, that all three we can find records of, but we find them records as workers and not the owners that they allege that they were. Unless this is a case of stolen identity, unless we are looking at something that is so diabolical and sick that they stole the identity of all of them because they needed to create a family tree that would obscure Kamala's true heritage. And the lack of reaction, the lack of an explanation that we are getting leads me to believe that they are hiding this truth. Also, now suddenly the trail has gone cold of me speaking with Donald Harris's brother. Again, I sense that he was being honest in saying that he did not know. Don't forget, his own brother does not know who his mother is. He says Donald Harris is exceedingly private about that. Why on earth would you need to be exceedingly private about who your mother was? Unless she was someone who was very powerful, who was very connected, and someone who was very involved in politics, unless she was someone who was in support of a man who was rounding up and calling for the extermination of Rastafarians. And you needed the public to believe, despite having that in your line, sick and twisted, as to sell to the American public that this woman was the first black president of black female president of the United States. Yeah, you'd want to cover that up. If you have a woman who has a grandparent or a great-grandparent who was tight with Bustamante, who was rounding up Rastafarians and cutting their dreads off and killing and torturing them, who can just not have any guilt, even slight guilt about that, and just pull out a black card and just be like, yeah, I'm going to be the first black president, and talking about her heritage in Harlem. Like, someone who's capable of that just feels nothing in their soul, is not a person that you want to give more power to. If you have it within you to take the identity of black people who were washing your clothes, right? Dealing with your plantation, which means they were descendants of the slaves that you owned. And you felt nothing when you stole their identity to create a story about yourself so that other black people would be enslaved by you in a different country. You are disturbed and dismissed as far as I'm concerned. So sick and tired of this weird double standard that seems to exist in black media. Have a candidate, a presidential candidate, who quite literally put on political blackface. We bust her in all of these lies, and nobody keeps that same energy. Like, what kind of blackness are they actually guarding? Is it blackness, or is it just the Democratic Party? You would think he would have taken the opportunity to address Kamala Harris's genealogy, her ancestry, who actually in your family is black. Instead, he gives her a platform. Listen to Kamala Harris here, because like I said, she's kind of doing the slow wipe here, trying to pretend like she never said she was black, never said she was African American. And she provides an excuse for how she's not really black, but is black on the basis of her mother's definition of community. I know that sounds crazy because it is. Take a listen.
My mother, she understood that there is a community that she wanted her children to be raised in. Mm-hmm. And she was very intentional and purposeful about that. And so I always say to people, even when I took the stage as the nominee for the Democratic nomination, that, you know, there is the family that you have by birth.
Okay.
And there is also the family you have by love.
No.
And they're equally family.
Yes.
right?
No.
And I learned that from my mother.
No.
So my mother, I had all these aunties and uncles. My Uncle Sherman, who was one of the first black men to graduate from Berkeley School of Law, who, when we were young girls, sat us down and taught us how to play chess. Because Uncle Sherman said, you need to understand how the chessboard works, because that's the way the world works. There are going to be different players with different moves, and you need to see the whole board. My mother raised us around, like my Auntie Chris, who went to Howard in the 50s and pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha. And she was one of my incredible role models growing up. And that was one of the big reasons I wanted to go to Howard University and pledge Alpha Kappa Alpha. Those are some of the lessons that I've learned from my mother. And I try to also share with people.
I mean, just look at him. How does that not register to Black America as an absolute fraud? Like, where is that same energy? He's like, yeah, that makes total sense. When, you know, and it's not your family, but it is your family. He's like, yeah. Yeah, just lapping it up and accepting whatever she says. Why? Because he doesn't have an original thought in his brain, and it's been mandated to him that the definition of blackness is basically enslaving yourself to the Democratic Party, even when you have someone who is quite literally wearing blackface. And for clarity, in case you are just jumping into this series, every single person that she just named there, her Auntie Chris, her Uncle Fred, her Aunt whatever, Shelley, none of those are her actual aunts and uncles. She admitted that in her book, if you read the fine print, that they weren't her actual aunts and uncles. But that's her experience with the Black community. And she's essentially saying to Shannon Sharpe, yeah, I'm going to keep blackfacing this because my mom told me it's cool. You're a disgrace for that. You really are a disgrace. Somebody who has been wearing political blackface simply because she wants votes from people that she perceives as stupid. The reason why I know that we have stumbled upon the truth is because she is very nervous now to discuss her blackness. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you her just yesterday in an interview. But first, I want to go back in memory lane. I just want to make sure that I remind everyone that it was the thing. She didn't even say she was Black. At once upon a time, 2006, she said she was African American. Like, there is no African in this woman, okay? Jamaican percentage at most. But in 2006, at the State of the Black Union, she became African. Take a listen.
It is morally incorrect, but nobody cares about that. You can look at Katrina. Nobody cares about the fact that we've got a bunch of young Black and brown men in prison. That argument is not working. What I suggest we do as African Americans is own this issue in law enforcement and then define it in the way that works for us, because it is a myth to say that African Americans don't want law enforcement. We do. We want our grandmothers to be able to walk to church and be safe. We want our babies to be able to walk to the park and be safe. What we don't want is racial profiling. What we don't want is excessive force. That's right. What we don't want is to have our civil liberties and civil rights be stripped. But we do want law enforcement.
Okay, Kamala, thus far you're like an Indian Canadian Jew, but we'll just go with that for a second. She's now freaking out when somebody, this journalist realizes, hey, you're no longer leaning into the historic nature of your campaign. Obviously, what this journalist meant was, weren't we all doing the, like, you're the first Black person running and you are just going to watch Kamala filibuster this, and suddenly she don't want to talk.
You've been reluctant to lean into, to talk about the historic nature of your candidacy on the campaign trail. Why is that? Well, I'm clearly a woman. I don't need to point that out to anyone. The point that most people really care about is, can you do the job? And do you have a plan to actually focus on them? I hear you on and that is why I spend the majority of my time listening and then addressing the concerns, the challenges, the dreams, the ambitions, and the aspirations of the American people. They deserve to have a president who's focused on them, as opposed to a Donald Trump who's constantly focused on himself. I think that's part of why people are exhausted with Donald Trump and his approach, because it's all about himself and his personal grievances, and not about the American people.
I mean, clearly a woman. Yeah, that wasn't the historic nature of their campaign. Hillary Clinton already ran twice. The historic nature, which if you had let Hallie finish her statement and you weren't going to let her because you're no dummy and you know people are onto you now, the historic nature that you seem now somewhat reluctant to speak about is your Blackness. You lean into that a lot. Come on. The brothers, the sisters, we're out here waiting for you to speak about your Blackness. She doesn't want to do it anymore, guys, because we've been telling you the truth. She's the worst kind of racist. I'm telling you, you can't just be out here plagiarizing grandmas. You can't just be out here plagiarizing agricultural laborers who likely worked on the farms that your family have owned for generations, because we now know that you were a direct descendant of slave owners. So sitting here talking about what Black people are struggling with due to historic injustice, you are really going to have to pipe down, ma'am. You have to pipe down right now.